And our guest right now is Amy Gray. She is with Great Lakes Caring of Newburyport. And Amy, thank you and welcome for coming in today.
Thanks for having me this morning, Wynn.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you in and to talk about a very important topic, hospice care. And I guess hospice care is something that people might be afraid of, might be a little nervous about, or maybe don't know anything about, or maybe it's a combination.
So I think you're absolutely right, Wynn. One of the things when you look at the statistics about hospice, it is definitely an underutilized benefit that is guaranteed to every Medicare recipient. So the thing I have found is that most individuals don't utilize hospice care because, one, they don't know enough about what it is. I've met with a lot of patients, and I've had the opportunity to meet with a lot of families, and one of the things that they fear when they hear the word hospice is that they're imminently dying. And statistics show that most recipients of hospice do use those services, and their average length of stay on hospice is 7 days, when really the benefit is entitled for 6 months or up to 6 months. And we've had a lot of patients who have been on hospice for longer than that because, we're not great at predicting end-of-life care. There's a lot of indicators to us by disease. But like I said, there's a lot of myths and misnomers about what hospice care is.
Oh, so what are some of those myths?
So a few things. I think most individuals think that when they talk about hospice, again, that they're imminently dying. So they don't know enough about their disease process. And I start most of my conversations with patients and families right there at that information. What do you know about your disease process? What has your doctor said to you about it? And a lot of families think that it's really for cancer patients, when really we serve more patients with dementia than we do with cancer. So they don't necessarily even know the diseases they're diagnosed with are terminal or in nature, and that there aren't curative interventions for that.
I never knew that, so I guess that's a myth or a misnomer, right?
The other thing I hear a lot is that a lot of patients think that we're just going to come in and start morphine. And I really having to talk about what we do for symptom management. And again, because we're usually utilized in the last 7 days of life, I think that's why morphine gets so highly associated with hospice care, because when we are asked to come to the table, people are so imminent and they are having a lot of end-of-life needs. But again, like I said, our push is really to encourage utilizing hospice much sooner in the disease process so that we can actually do the real work of hospice, which is to get right back to the grassroots start, which is really to bring in our whole interdisciplinary team of people, of chaplains, social workers, our home health aides, complementary therapies like music therapy, massage therapy, and our nursing team to really help articulate what's important to you. When you are dealing with a life-limiting or chronic illness, how do you want to spend your days? Most individuals do not want to spend it in the hospital, which is exactly where they are. Mm-hmm. And that starts the conversation, which is really the wrong place.
I kind of thought that hospice was more delivered at home, but I guess it's in the hospital too.
So hospice, I always say, is a service, and that's another myth. People think, I have to go somewhere for hospice. And hospice is really delivered wherever patients are. So sometimes that means we provide hospice in a hospital setting, but most of the care is provided in those individuals' homes. So for instance, if they're living in an assisted living setting, so for instance, we have a lot of assisted livings in this area, we have a lot of patients who are accessing hospice services in that residency. People are also, their homes are their nursing homes or long-term care placements, so we provide hospice there. And again, then in their more formal residential settings, we've provided hospice to individuals who are homeless or living in shelters. So we get really creative about how we do that because we feel so strongly about the service and what it can add to help quality of life for individuals who are dying.
Well, we're talking with Amy Gray. She's a clinical nurse supervisor with Great Lakes Caring in Newburyport. And that's interesting that you can provide it at any location, including a homeless person. And is the care generally more for the patient or more for the patient's family?
I would say it's for both. I think a lot of times it is engaging families in conversation and asking them to all sit down and really have the hard conversations. And there's actually a whole movement called the Conversation Project, and like another movement called the 5 Wishes, about where you really sit families and their loved ones down to start that conversation before you're really in those imminent phases, to talk about, again, quality of life. How do you want to spend your days? What's most important to you? And then helping to engage those patients to help let their family members know what they want, because oftentimes that's what you see. It's such a taboo topic still, which is interesting to me. We've made so many gains in healthcare, but it's still this topic we don't talk about. And so really helping families and patients to have those conversations together is a huge part of the initial step with hospice.
So not everybody who is involved with hospice care, who provides hospice care, they aren't all medical people. Some might be volunteers, some might have strengths in other areas.
That's absolutely right. And again, we call that our interdisciplinary team. So we rely heavily on our volunteer base to help. Volunteers do everything from sitting vigil with individuals at very end of life, or they really help engage those individuals who might not have a ton of family resources. So maybe they go and do what we call a tea to remember. They talk about their story, kind of what do they want to be remembered for, what's their legacy. We've had volunteers even sit and just play board games with members of our patients census. Our chaplains are a huge part of our work too. So we talk a lot about, what are some of the spiritual concerns you have as we're talking about your disease. And some people are really at peace with that. They've come to that term a long time ago. And some really have a lot of existential suffering, I call it. So, it might not be the disease burden that they struggle with, but where am I going? I have a lot of things I need to rectify. I didn't have a great relationship with God and now I need one. Or, I've struggled with my religion for a long time. And sometimes the chaplains are the people they get along the best with, and they never really talk about formalized religion, but they talk more about spirituality. So they're a huge part of our service too.
Wow. Now, can you, I know you can't, name names, but any calls that you've been on yourself that find interesting? Many
calls. I think, again, the ones that stand out the most to me are really those individuals who at the final days, it's an honor and a privilege to be there, and it's the most vulnerable time for patients and families. But those final days, I've had the honor of knowing those patients for a long time, and then those final days are the most intimate. And I always say to my staff and to those people I talk about hospice with is, you don't get a chance to do that again. So let's make this right. And sometimes it's a lot of education about what to expect. And you do a lot more education with families around that at times. But again, I would say I have a million stories I could tell you about how special that time can be if you really help families engage in it. Yes, death is a very sad thing, but it can also be a really beautiful thing if we help families get to that point.
I've heard stories, and maybe you've seen this, where people all of a sudden they snap up like they're wide awake, and then they pass. Or
we call that the rally. It's really common. So I've seen, again, even a couple of weeks ago, I saw a patient, and I thought, she really has days, and preparing family, preparing staff for that. And the next day, the staff said, "Oh my goodness, she was up eating lunch today." And I said, "She was?" And I said, "I bet this is her rally. I bet this is that kind of that period of time where things look really good." But I also said this is when we should help families prepare that to the next couple of days might be really bad, but also how do you take advantage of that rally? How do you really engage with those individuals at that time? And sure enough, in the next 2 days, she had really declined again and passed very shortly after.
Huh. I've also heard stories that like windows would open and a door would open. Has that ever happened to you?
I think tons of people have a lot of really spiritual, experiences. The other thing that's so common, and I prepare families too, when your loved one starts talking kind of oddly about transportation, it's always a sign to me that death is closer. So I've had a lot of individuals who might get a little confused at times, really, and I know they're closer to the end, maybe days or weeks, talking about wanting to get on a train, wanting to get on a plane. And it's kind of like clockwork. I see them pass pretty quickly within the next week.
Holy cow.
So I always think when you hear conversation about transportation, start really paying attention to what's going on.
Wow. How long have you been doing this?
So I've been doing hospice and palliative care for 9 years.
Okay.
I started out as a hospice social worker and then said, there's more I can be doing with this, more work more help I wanted to give to patients and families, so I went back to nursing school.
Huh. Well, we're talking with Amy Gray. She's a clinical nurse supervisor for Great Lakes Caring in Newburyport. And you mentioned that, that most of the time you get called in probably a little too late with maybe about 7 days to go. No, you can't clock it, but So you can you can be called in as what, 6 months ahead of time, or?
Yeah, so again, we look at, there's lots of different disease criteria that we use. And again, maybe I'll use the example of dementia because it's a disease that most people don't think is a qualifier for hospice. So, there are indicators of decline that we look for that help us understand when somebody might be in that 6-month window. And again, the criteria is that if we believe a disease takes its natural progression, then an individual would have 6 months or less to live. But the thing I always articulate is that just because we're utilizing the benefit doesn't mean we're speeding up a death process. We're letting things happen naturally. But we look at, has your loved one had recurrent infections or pneumonias? Do they get a lot of urinary tract infections? Have they had weight loss? We look at those kind of indicators. And then as diseases, we have other indicators for when we're at end stage of process. So again, the benefit is designed to be 6 months of a benefit period through Medicare. I would also say, though, a lot of commercial insurances are changing that because they're looking at how are we spending our healthcare dollars. And a lot of data has said that we spend a lot of money in the last 6 months of life, more money than we do at any other part in a person's healthcare spending. And so they're starting to change that criteria to be a year or more, a year or less, that a patient would have a year or less. Part of that, too, is because physicians are really poor prognosticators, and they don't want to be the ones to say, this is what I think. And I get that, and I think that's why, as hospice providers, we're the experts in that. We try to take that off, primary care physicians' plates a little bit because we've studied it so much. But I think things are shifting. And so, again, because the service and benefit is so great for families, and it really, not only does it cut down healthcare spending, but again, people are spending time where they want to spend it, not in their PCP's office, not getting poked and prodded, not in Boston hospitals, getting intensive level of service just to find out, all right, you still really have, weeks to live. I think most patients would have said, had I known that, had I been given all of that information, I would have rather be home surrounded by my family, not spending my days in the hospital.
I remember a story from years ago where this lady, I think she was probably in her 90s, she got diagnosed with terminal cancer. So instead of doing any of the treatments at all, she bought a motorcycle and went on it.
I love it. I mean, that's what it's all about. Yeah. I think that's the other thing I tell families too is, we talk a lot about hospice being focused on dying, but I reframe that. And I said, hospice really is about how do you want to live? How do you want to spend your time? And we've talked very little about the actual death process. And initially, it's more about, again, how do you want to focus your days? And so if there are little goals like I want to get to the beach again, or I really want to have, Thanksgiving dinner with my family, how do we help make that happen for those individuals who maybe have not been able to do that because of their medical needs? So again, more focused on how do you live a good quality life? You may have less days, but how do you make those days count more?
Now, when you get called in, or is it just you and the patient, or is it you and the patient and the patient's family? How's that work?
It really varies. So we really do encourage family engagement if there's a family that's involved, because again, I think, individual patients really rely a lot of times on their families to help them make decisions. So we do really try to engage families. Again, it's also helpful because we want everyone kind of on the same page, hearing the same information, especially given some of the myths about hospice. So kind of dispelling some of those myths initially so that we can get everyone engaged. So it really, again, it's also patient specific in what they want, but it's always a preference to engage families because they're the core of all care, really.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of skill involved, but you do some of these hospice organizations use volunteers to help out too, just to
absolutely. So like I said, to be vigil volunteers is a huge component of it, but we also, like I said, rely a lot on volunteers to help with how do you want to document your legacy? Sometimes families, I've had individuals say, every year I read my grandkids a Christmas story, and that really is sad to me to think that I won't be part of that, but I want them to remember this. And so we've done, recordings of the readings so that the kids have it every year. And I think that's really helpful, not just for grandkids, but for adult children too. It's really hard to lose your parent. We're getting to the time where people have lost both parents, and how do you help that memory live on?
Wow. Well, you have a very important job, and a very important service that all hospice workers provide.
Yeah, I think it's super important, and I really encourage people to kind of seek out information and try to get to know more about hospice and not see it as the dreaded H word that it's been known for. And again, encouraging people to make calls. It's never a bad thing to ask questions, and we're there to guide people and help them understand what we can offer and when we can offer it. And I would be glad any day to kind of see and meet people just to give them information, because like I said, it's a widely underutilized service, and people are accessing it way too late in their disease process.
All right. Well, Amy, I want to thank you, and we'll have to get you back again.
Great. Thank you so much, Wynn.
Oh, you're welcome. Amy Gray, who is a clinical nurse supervisor with Great Lakes Caring in Newburyport, our guest this morning here on WJOP Radio 96.3 FM and broadcasting simultaneously on Comcast Channel 9 in Newburyport. And we have a guest with us this morning, Lindsey Haight, the Executive Director of Our Neighbor's Table. Lindsey, thank you for coming in today.
Good morning, Wynn. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're in the news. Our Neighbor's Table is in the news. You're not in the news a lot, but Our Neighbor's Table is in the news a lot. You do a lot of good things.
Well, there's never a dull moment, as we like to say, and we're so appreciative to have outlets like WJOP and other radio and newspaper outlets who cover the story, because it's an important one to share, and there's a lot of woes that come with our work, but really, we're busy every day because of the generosity of our community and our commitment to taking care of each other. So it's all good things.
I'm talking about generosity. Greg Jardis over at Amesbury Industrial Supply, very generous, isn't he?
Very generous. Got his name, or the name of his parents, up on the building for such generosity. So was pivotal in creating our new facility, the Jardis Taylor Center. It's almost been 2 years since we opened. It's
really
hard to believe. Yeah,
oh
May
gosh.
will be our 2-year anniversary, and Greg, among others, are still working really hard every day on our board to continue our work, to get the word out, to raise awareness, to, spread our impact across our region. So.
Now, Our Neighbor's Table, we're talking about the Jardis Center.
The Jardis Taylor Center.
Jardis Taylor Center, okay. And that is on Main Street. That is adjacent to, most folks probably remember where CVS used to be.
Yeah.
So that's right across the driveway from that.
Yes, yep. We're 2 doors down from the Amesbury Post Office, across from Patton's Pond on Main Street. So for folks coming from Newburyport, if you come along the river as you're heading up Main Street towards downtown, we're right there on the right. We've got about half of a small plaza, and we've got a nice, efficient warehouse, some offices that can accommodate all of our staff, volunteers, and interns. But most of all, we've got a beautiful market where guests, local residents who are struggling, can come each week and shop for their groceries. And I say shop in air quotes. All of the food that we give is free of charge, but we've created a genuine, market shopping experience, just like if you were going to a tiny Stop and Shop or Whole Foods or Market Basket, and offer a full array of what's available.
Yeah, you have a basket and you go up and down the aisles.
That's right. You get a cart, you go through, we bag it at the checkout, and actually, even better than most grocery stores, we have door-to-car service. So we have customer service volunteers who are there to help every single guest bring their groceries to their car, load them in their trunk, and get them on their way.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. And if I remember correctly, there was a story. Well, now the times blend. But you won an award from the Boston Food Pantry?
The Greater Boston Food Bank, yes.
That's it,
so that was, what year are we in now? We're in 2018.
Yeah.
Time flies. It was not long after we opened the Jardis Taylor Center. We were recognized as Community Partner of the Year in the fall of 2016. That was tremendous. We've been a longtime partner of the Greater Boston Food Bank. In fact, 2/3 of the food that we give out comes from the Greater Boston Food Bank. We are members of the Agency Advisory Council there, so for more than 10 years have really been part of the strategic vision of what kinds of foods they're offering, how they're getting it out to their 500 plus organization member agencies across Eastern Massachusetts. So one really important thing that's come out of our partnership with the Greater Boston Food Bank and our role in the Agency Advisory Council is the focus on fresh foods. And for anyone who walks into our market, what is most striking is the center produce section that we have. You go to the grocery store and all the fresh, healthy things are on the periphery of the market. In ours, it's front and center. That's what people need most when they come to us. They want to eat fresh fruits and vegetables. They want to eat, fish and, hummus and tofu and things like that. They really actually do. People who are struggling with food insecurity are just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. But the reality is those are the things that are most expensive at the grocery store, and they can't afford it. And so they tell us that's what we need most from you. So while we provide a whole host of non-perishable food items that we get from the food bank, from local community food drives, our focus is making sure that we have those items that they can't afford at the grocery store ready for them when they come. And so over the years, as we've been hearing that more from our guests, we've relayed that information up to the Greater Boston Food Bank, along with our other colleagues who are hearing the same message in their programs. And so the Greater Boston Food Bank responded to that and said, okay, we're going to focus. And now they're close to 50% of the food they distribute are fresh foods.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That programs like ours can utilize.
Yeah. Of course, you get into expiration and stuff like that. So it's a little more work to deliver fresh food, but it's much better.
It's a lot more work. And in fact, our new facility was built. It had to be designed to accommodate that. So we have two large coolers now. We have a refrigerator and a freezer that allows us to store that product. We are now open 4 days a week, Wednesday through Saturday, 12 hours a week. We're available for people to come, not to mention our off-site mobile and home delivery programs that we're running. And so we need fresh food. Our food comes in on Tuesday, and it's got to stay fresh enough that when somebody comes on Saturday, it's still going to last them 3 to 5 days in their home before they can come back. So I don't think people realize, I certainly didn't realize how much logistical and operational work goes behind distributing 1 million meals in 12 months. And it takes an immense amount of operation. So our volunteers, our staff, we have 2 box trucks. We just got a refrigerated box truck in the fall, which increases our capacity tremendously to be able to move that fresh food around and keep it high quality.
So we're talking with Lindsey Haight. She's the executive director of Our Neighbor's Table. And you mentioned 1 million meals a year?
Yes. In 2016, we had distributed about 550,000 meals. And at the end of 2017, we were just under hitting 1 million. So cow. 950,000 meals went out. So a lot of work. That's roughly 1.5 million pounds of food. So to all those volunteers who've been helping in our warehouse and loading and unloading and sorting food and stocking the shelves, I hope you got some rest over the holidays. Rest those weary backs, but they're all right back at it. So it's really exciting. What's most exciting, though, the 1 million meals, 1 million is such a big number. But what's most exciting is the number of people we're reaching. And it increased to 3,400 people, over 3,400 people in 2017 across the region. 860 children ate food from Our Neighbor's Table last year, up from just around 500 the year before.
Wow.
We increased the number of seniors by more than 100 from the year before. And we're increasing our regional reach. When I started 8 years ago, actually, it's my 8th year anniversary today.
Hey, congratulations.
Now that I think of it. And
February 1st.
It's February 1st, and my son turned 7. So you could do the math, how much excitement has happened since I've been at Our Neighbor's Table. When I started, probably 80 to 85% of the people we were serving were from Amesbury. And before we moved to our new facility, that was around 75%. we continue to serve more and more people from Amesbury. In fact, for the last 4 years, 1 out of 12 residents in Amesbury has eaten food from our neighbor's table.
Oh, wow.
And we can talk more about that in a second. But today, Amesbury residents only make up about 50% of the people that we're serving. So of those 3,400, 1,700 of them are coming from throughout the region. The biggest percentage of those folks are coming from Newburyport, Salisbury, Merrimack, but people are trucking all the way from Rowley and Boxford, Georgetown, Groveland, Newbury, to be able to come and shop at that center. And again, I think it speaks to the dignified service and engagement that they experience when they come, and the freedom to be able to access food that they really need. So those are staggering numbers. We're really excited about being able to continue. We just added a Wednesday shift, so now we are, as I mentioned, open 4 days a week. That brought us up to over 400 people coming through the market every week, plus the off-site distributions that we run twice a month, and then we do home delivery for people who are either temporarily or permanently homebound.
So you're delivering the food so they can make their own meals.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
And the offsite, you deliver. Those are food pantries in other communities?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And they focus. We've got one in Merrimack on the first and third Saturday of the month. So it's at the senior center, but it's open to any residents of Merrimack. And we basically just kind of bring a mobile version of our market there, and so they have a whole assortment of the same foods but for folks who can't get to Amesbury, we don't want that to be a barrier.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a couple in communities for seniors and people with disabilities. Again, they can't get out. They can't, they don't have a car. They can't truck, 25 pounds of food back to their apartment. So we're right there in their communities. We partner with, it's really run by people who live in those communities, and so that if somebody is ill one day and can't come out to the community room, or somebody's gone into rehab due to an illness, the neighbors are really taking care of each other.
Yeah. I know a guy, he's out of the country right now, but fortunate he was able to retire at an early age, and instead of just laying around not doing anything, he volunteers with our neighbor's table.
Oh, great.
So that's a neat thing.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of retirees. There's no age cap. I think the oldest one in my tenure has been about 97, 98 years old, in the kitchen every week, chopping celery and onions. We've got volunteers who are 5. In fact, we've just started a We Can Help, WEE, We Can Help program for people who want to volunteer with their young children, ages 5 to 7. We've got a slot carved out for them where they can stock our market, right? And it's really fun every Wednesday afternoon. So we do ask folks who want to come and volunteer to come sign up online, ourneighborstable.org/volunteer. It's very easy. There's an online application. We really just want to know a little bit about you. They can fill that out online, and then they actually get invited to an orientation where we give them an overview of the organizations, talk about our core values and how we do our work, and how important those are to bringing people out in a very difficult time to get help in their community. And then we get folks signed up. Everything is easy. It's online. If you don't like being online, that's right. We've got an amazing volunteer coordinator, Alice, who can, walk you through it, sign you up over the phone.
Yeah.
We have more than 600 active volunteers every year who are putting in more than 550 hours of service every single week to make our programs run. So we try to make as many things as easy as possible for our volunteers, and we really rely on them. They are literally the backbone of our organization.
And I'll start with that flagship meal over at the Congregational Church?
Main Street Congregational Church in Amesbury.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was Wednesdays or Thursdays?
It's Wednesdays. It continues Wednesday. It's still We had beef stew last night, and so every Wednesday from 4 to 6, no registration required. We don't care where you live, who you are. Come have dinner. We have a nice 3-course meal. Those meals are sponsored by local families, businesses. Align Credit Union was just in there last week. The student peer leaders from Amesbury High School will be there. And other local businesses and churches come in each week to serve. They get to be the wait staff. It's a really fun experience. And then we have core volunteers who are in there Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, prepping, cooking, and cleaning up.
Have to clean.
But that meal has been going on for almost 26 years. Last year was our 25th anniversary.
How about that?
May 6th will mark 26 years.
Yeah. And the thing that amazes me is that all of these food services, they all get along together. Like over the Salvation Army, I know they do. It's a Wednesday lunch and a Thursday evening meal, and you do your Wednesday evening meal. And there's some churches I know they have breakfast, and some are on the weekends and all that.
Yeah, the local providers here have worked really hard over the years to make sure that food is readily available throughout the week. And so between local food pantries or our market programs or a hot meal, you can actually access just about one or the other just about every day of the week except for Sundays. So we actually convene the group of Seacoast area pantries is kind of what we call it, but it's broader than that. It includes the local senior centers who have meal programs. It includes Pettingill House, Salvation Army, Community Services of Newburyport, Community Action, all of those agencies that are touching food and distributing food in one way or another to make sure that our programs are coordinated. And actually, now that we've got this added capacity, we are really looking at there are enough resources, there's enough will in this community that we believe that nobody has to go without food. There are a lot of complex issues that are facing people in our communities, but there's plenty to go around to make sure that nobody has to worry about being hungry. And so we launched our strategic plan last year, just a few months ago, and we've kicked off our regional assessment process. In fact, next Tuesday we have the local mayors and town managers, superintendents' offices, Anna Jake's Hospital coming together for sort of our kickoff, or our, I guess you could call it a kickoff meeting. We've had a couple meetings so far, and really looking at how we can assess where people are falling through the cracks.
Oh, okay.
What kinds of resources, what kind of creativity do we need to bring to our community to make sure nobody is going without? And that's going to be a coordinated effort. Our Neighbors Table and our programs themselves can't be everywhere and everything to everybody in this 35-mile span of a service region. So how do we work with the local churches, with the schools, with our community hospital, with our other partner agencies to make sure that food is being distributed in a lot of different ways to reach the different needs of the community and different populations. So we're really excited about that. Our strategic goal actually is our goal is to ensure universal access to food in the Amesbury, Merrimack, Salisbury, and Newburyport communities by 2020. We're already doing it in Amesbury, and there'll be some more information coming out about that soon. As I mentioned, 1 out of 12 Amesbury residents eats food from our Neighbors Table throughout the year, and that's been the case for the last 4 years. It says a lot about the need, but it also says a lot about the impact that we can have. And if you're in Amesbury and you're struggling, you might have to worry about your heat or keeping the roof over your head, but you don't have to worry about food. And that's a powerful thing, and I think the residents of Amesbury should feel really proud. But what I'm really excited about is being able to replicate that success in these other communities. And during that time, our goal will then be to ready ourselves for the subsequent 3 years to be able to spread that to the southern half of our service region.